Disrobe down to tasteful black underwear. A black mask will be provided and is to be worn by all submissives. You must avoid eye contact with the femdoms, but be present, aware, and anticipatory to the left shoulder of your domina at all times, ready to serve. Tonight, you live solely to serve the queens, silently, invisibly, but with acute precision and attention to detail and service. Hello, my pets, and welcome into The Dungeon, the podcast for submissives and their owners to learn, grow, be entertained, and ultimately find empowerment in their lifestyle. I'm your host, Kat Nash, the Music City Dominatrix, and I'm curious, how did my intro make you feel? I can only imagine the instructions given to the submissives serving at the High Protocol Femdom Soiree I recently had the extreme pleasure of attending. This was my first such event, and to be honest, I'm now borderline obsessed. I cannot speak about the experience from a submissive's perspective, but this week I am inviting you into the experience through my eyes. Snuggle in, my pets, or assume the kneeling position, because it's story time. This adventure began months ago with an online inquiry into my interest in attending an intimate, high-protocol femdom event. A well-known and respected domina in the local community, whom I'd had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times, was planning an evening. The anticipation and distinguished vibe grew as the date approached. I was hand-delivered 2 thick black envelopes. One said "Kat" in gold letters. The other was blank for my submissive of choice. Inside were formally printed invitations to the Femdom Soiree. In addition to the elegant invite were printouts of expectations for the femdoms and instructions for the submissives. Additional instructions and information were communicated online in the weeks leading up to the event. At 6 p.m. on the dot, I arrived at the home of the hostess. Dressed in a black and crimson velour Betty Page dress, a faux fur capelet, and long gloves, my version of cocktail attire, I somewhat anxiously approached the front door. The door was then opened for me by an S-type wearing a black corset and panties. Standing before me was a line of masked submissives. They were all nude except for black underwear. The masks were black strips across their eyes, and the actual eye part was cut out so they could see. Very Mask of Zorro-like. Each submissive held a silver platter slightly above waist height. There was a collar or ribbon on each platter. The nervousness of the submissives was like honey in the air. Absolutely fucking delicious. The hostess greeted me, looking stunning as always. She wore a somewhat gothic style long red gown. The slit was high and her cleavage was poppin'. Not to be a perv, but I'm wanting to really paint the picture for you all. Beauty. The S-type who opened the door for me took my purse and hostess gift, and I was free to place the collar, or ribbon in my case, around the neck of my submissive. The anxiety coming off of him was so thick I could literally eat it like a cupcake. Have I mentioned how much I absolutely adore a trembling submissive? Delicious. As I tied the black ribbon around his neck, I whispered, "This is a reminder of exactly whom you belong to tonight." In retrospect, it was kind of silly of me to say this because the subs had been at that location for 3.5 hours already, being trained how to serve their mistress to perfection. Once I had him collared, I was invited into the sitting room. The lights were dim, and the TV played a woman DJ creating the musical ambiance. I joined the femdoms that were already present as the others continued to arrive. My submissive promptly brought me a champagne glass on silver platter. All 6 of us femdoms enjoyed conversation in the sitting room over non-alcoholic drinks for the first little bit. Outside of the hostess's friend and protege, none of us really knew each other very well. Despite the certain amount of anxiety I experience walking into a situation where I know pretty much no one, these strong, beautiful women all immediately set each other at ease. Every single woman was open, authentic, and just extraordinarily likable. Like, really easy to get along with. Not to mention fucking hot. It's amusing to note that the invitations specified that we wear fetish formal or cocktail attire, and every single one of us wore black and red or just solid black, which are my favorite colors. It's just amusing. Nobody showed up in yellow. Nobody was wearing orange or even purple. It was all black and red, all of us. At the ding of a small chime, we filtered upstairs to the hostess's personal dungeon space. Now, this room was awesome. I kind of covet it. It was this beautiful burgundy room with black accents throughout. Furniture was arranged and had our name tags on it, and it was interspersed with small tables for setting things. Our submissives arrived with drinks personally chosen from a menu that offered both cocktails and mocktails for us to choose from. All of them had like a sexy, gothic type vibe. My submissive stayed at my left shoulder, tray in position. He was like my personal piece of furniture. Another domina had brought a deck of cards with conversational questions, and we took turns reading and answering them. Our conversation ranged from hilarity and laughter to sharing serious past experiences and even deep personal insight for each other. I honestly can't remember the last time I experienced that heady bliss of connective and vulnerable conversation with strangers whom I immediately felt at ease. Like, probably never. I don't think I've ever experienced that before. And I really attribute this to the authentic and validating vibe that the hostess herself emits, and just the evolved and empowered nature of each of the femdoms that were present. And I can't leave out the S-types, the submissives were just, to say that they were respectful, it was just us having conversation, and they were so well trained and so respectful. The S-types stood at the shoulder of their femdoms. There was a couple of extra submissives there that they kind of seemed to be the head subs. They assisted in taking my gloves and furs. They silently guided our submissives. At the ring of a chime from the hostess, the submissives would disappear momentarily and reappear, their silver platters laden with one delectable after another. So a local kinky chef catered the event. I mean, I don't know if she's like kinky while while cooking, but they are a caterer in the community, and they're in the kinky community, and they're an amazing chef. And the hostess had it catered. So throughout the next 4 hours, upon the chime of the hostess's bell, our subs would disappear momentarily and then reappear, holding a new course for us to enjoy. And I'm going to start drooling talking about this because it was so delicious. It started with individual charcuteries. Their next course were caprese skewers, drizzled in balsamic glaze. I'm salivating right now. Next was a really fascinating crostini with roasted beet, garlic hummus, avocado, flake salt, pepper, toasted pumpkin and flax seeds, and a little tiny bit of arugula. It was such an interesting combination. I don't even know how to describe the flavor, except it was just kind of like biting into a magical spring garden. Like, that's the best way I can even describe it. Next were deviled eggs with a spicy bacon jam. Then were the absolute tiniest baked potatoes with sour cream and chives. And I'm talking, each potato was like the size of a fingertip. It was like a size of a fingernail. They were so tiny. I didn't know that potatoes existed that small. They're miniature, but they had a surprisingly strong, delicious flavor. Then there were flank steak bites with goat cheese, dried mango, and mint. Such an interesting combination. Really, everything was kind of a mind fuck of delicious flavors. Like, just taking a bite would send your mind reeling to grasp, like, what am I eating? What am I tasting here? Because it was just such unique combinations that were so interesting. It was really the most fine dining experience I think I've ever had. And it was made all the more exquisite by the conversation, the stimulating conversation, the amazing company, and maybe a little bit by the fact that there were mostly naked submissives silently serving us. Upon each new course, one S-type would take the floor in front of us. So they had been instructed to prepare some sort of presentation and entertainment to last no more than 5 minutes each. As each of them stood there, I could feel the nerves when it was their turn. They would stand in their spot, on display in just their underwear and mask, as us femdoms finished up whatever conversation we were having. And then when we were done, we would give them our temporary attention. There was a beautiful poem, an ode to femdoms, a dance routine that felt like an art piece on flexibility and the beautiful fluidity of the human body. It really made me want to stretch because they were very, very flexible. There were songs, homemade songs, new renditions of songs, and even a fascinating physics lesson and demonstration. Instruments included a guitar, a kazoo, and a didgeridoo. These were all played for our amusement and entertainment. The whole experience made me nostalgic for something I have never experienced. It reminded me of the royal courts of old, where royalty was served and entertained, but the focus was always on the royalty. The submissives served us. We weren't there to satisfy their kinks or even to give them attention. We were there for an evening of elegant company, conversation, and fine dining. And here's the interesting thing. Though I was pretty much ignoring him the whole time, I feel like the connection between myself and this sub just grew stronger. And this was somebody that is not really like a personal close sub of mine. It's someone that I have played with and who has done some service for me. But just the act of him being a part of this and how intense it was and just being so proud of how he did made me feel bonded to him as a dom-sub dynamic, honestly. Surprisingly, really. The subs, along with the mastermind behind it all, our wonderful hostess, created this evening of luxury and extravagance that was far beyond a kinky dinner party. It was an experience that took us out of our typical everyday reality and into a bubble existing outside of time. For one evening, fantasy was a lived reality for the subs and the dominas. It was one woman's dream made manifest, and she invited 16 of us, doms, subs, caterers, to be a part of this magic. And it really was magic. The caterer culminated the fine dining experience with a devil's food cake individually for each of us. It had dark chocolate mousse dome inside it and a Nutella center with a red mirror glaze and candy melt horns. And it was surrounded by a bed of salted crushed Oreo dirt. I have lived in regret since that night thinking about this dessert, but maybe not what you think. It wasn't because I indulged in it. But I've lived in regret since then because I didn't eat every single bite and then gluttonously lick the plate clean like I really, really wanted to. And I'm seriously salivating right now. And then the finale of the culinary evening was a homemade black pepper ice cream infused with black peppercorns, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, ginger, brown sugar, and a sugar skull. And it was, get this, it was black ice cream. Oh, it was amazing. It may or may not have stained all of our teeth blue for the pictures, which, by the way, we had signed picture release forms at the beginning of the evening, giving the professional photographer permission to take photos of the entire evening. After hours and hours of this just exquisite, elegant meal, connective, stimulating conversations, and very amusing and heartening submissive entertainment, we then played several games. There was a panty toss where our submissives lay in a row on the ground in front of us and we attempted to toss the clean panties into their mouth for the highest prize. There was a blindfolded pin the sticker on the sub challenge and a little sticky guy ninja toss game. In all the games, our subs were the targets for our amusement, and there were also prizes for the winning femdom. I didn't win anything other than the extreme satisfaction that came from playing these games, which was definitely good enough for me. The evening was wrapped up with a photo shoot opportunity for us and our submissive. And the hostess, ever the gracious host, had gifts for both submissives and the femdoms. And with her unwavering graciousness, she had the submissives give us our gift bags and then gave us our bags to give to the S-types. Just incredibly thoughtful. Just every detail was so well thought out. The gifts, and I don't know if I should say, the gifts for the femdoms were nice, like really shockingly nice and personalized. It was just amazing. There was time and space for aftercare. As the hostess acknowledged, the experience can be quite strenuous and grueling for the submissives, along with the just vulnerability of being practically nude in front of a bunch of elegantly clothed and powerful women. The physical act of standing and holding trays for literally hours, you can imagine how taxing that could be. And then there is the additional emotional effect of being pretty much ignored for hours. It can be a lot, even for the most servile of submissives. So the evening was wrapped up with the S-types being allowed to get dressed and spend a little time in aftercare with their femdom, however that looked to them. Conversation, cuddles, however that was. The evening was magical. It was an experience that I didn't really fully grasp the feeling that it would emit, or just the feeling of the evening, until I experienced it. And now, honestly, I can't stop thinking about it. I want more. The knowledge that it was as equally a fantasy made reality to the submissives involved, I mean, it just really lights my brain up with excitement. Your wildest dreams need not remain delegated to that part of your brain labeled unrealistic. This evening was so much more than a kinky high protocol dinner party. It was a fantasy made into reality. It was one woman's dream, and she manifested it into an evening of perfection, which existed seemingly outside of time and reality. It really was a dream come true. And my question for you is, what wildest fantasy do you have stored in the file cabinet of your brain that is mislabeled as unrealistic? What dream for you in your life is just begging for you to relabel it as now is the time, or let's just fucking go for it already? When our current reality sucks or is less than, let's start making new ones. Let me know what you think of this whole experience. Thank you for joining me for this story time. And as always, stay kinky, my pets.